Hey, how's it going, everyone? The Ghostbuster update has just hit the game, and it looks pretty incredible. But today I'm going to be breaking down all of the new Ghostbuster kits and kind of talking about how they all work. Because at first glance it looks pretty confusing and kind of like a bit of a mess, but it's actually really clever and they all work together quite well. So first I'm going to go ahead and just read through each of the abilities pretty quickly, and then I'll kind of talk about how they all work together. So let's start with Slimer. His basic attack will deal 80% damage to the target foe, and then if the foe did not have taunt, he will gain attack up 2, and he'll have a 65% chance to copy one buff from that foe to himself. Then, if he had stealth, he will lose it and inflict fear on the target. That's probably the most important part of this ability, and that ties in really well with his passive. His first special will deal 120% damage, and if the foe had fear, they're inflicted with grit down 2, and then he will give skill up to a random Ghostbuster ally for 2 turns. His second special ability will deal 60% damage to all foes, and foes with fear are inflicted with defense down 2, and foes without fear lose 30% pep and are inflicted with speed down. Now, Slimer's a pretty fast character. I think his speed is 120, so he will go before a lot of units, and if you use this special ability, you can reduce their pep and inflict them with speed down, which will really help you to control how many turns they are taking. And then for his passive ability, when he takes damage while he's under 75% health, he will gain stealth for 1 turn, and whenever he does gain stealth, he will clear 2 random debuffs from himself. So basically, as long as he is under that 75% health minimum, he will immediately gain stealth whenever he is damaged, and that stealth will last until the end of his next turn, and that's why it works really well with his basic, because if he had stealth, he'll lose it and immediately inflict fear on the target. So basically, his basic attack will end up inflicting fear as well, and he will also be clearing debuffs from himself quite often, so it will be very difficult to lock him down with something like stun or disarmed. Then we have Venkman. His basic will deal 110% damage and have a 50% chance to deal 25% bonus damage. Pretty straightforward there. His first special will deal 90% damage, and then he'll call a random Ghostbuster ally to assist for 80% damage. And if there aren't any Ghostbuster allies, he will instead call a random ally to assist for 50% damage. And then his second special will deal 120% damage and reduce their pep by 50%, quite a big reduction there. And if the target was spooky or their pep was reduced to 0, stun them for 1 turn. So as long as you're smart about who you're using this ability on, this is a guaranteed stun right here. And then his passive ability, he is immune to fear first of all, and then whenever he takes damage from a spooky foe, he will have a 50% chance to counterattack. As you're probably noticing, most of these kits have some pretty strong anti-spooky synergy, as was expected from the Ghostbusters. And then whenever another magical hero attacks, he will have a 60% chance to heal himself for 10% of his max health. And there are only 3 other magical characters currently in the game, Magisto, Willa, and Master Wu. So those characters will trigger that right there. Then for Ray, his basic will deal 100% damage to a single target. That's worded really weirdly. I'm not sure why it doesn't just say target enemy. And if it was a random target, it would probably just say to a random enemy. So I'm not sure what single target means. But if the target was spooky, he'll gain 10% pep, and if he had fear, he will gain 10% more pep. So a little bit of pep gain there that isn't going to make a huge difference. His first special will heal himself for 5% of his max health for each spooky ally and enemy, and then he will deal 90% damage to the target foe. And then he will have a 70% chance to clear 2 debuffs from the hero with the most debuffs. And if the target foe had grit down, Ray will also clear all stacks of fear from all Ghostbuster heroes and clear 1 random debuff from all spooky heroes. So as we just saw earlier, that works really well with Slimer's first special ability with the grit down right there. For his second special ability, he will deal 95% damage to a single target, and it will have an additional 25% chance to critically hit. And if the target was spooky, this attack will instead have a plus 100% chance to critically hit. And then for his passive, whenever Ray is critically hit, he will clear one random debuff from a random hero, and at the start of the battle, Ray will gain 15% critical damage for each other Ghostbuster hero. Now here it says each other, so that won't count himself most likely, so potentially that's plus 60% critical damage, which will make quite a big difference. Then we have Winston. His basic will deal 85% damage to the target foe, and he will have a 65% chance to gain a stack of courage, and if the target was spooky, he will gain 2 stacks instead, so Winston does in fact utilize courage as we suspected. And then his first special reads, for each stack of courage that he has, he will gain a stack of heal over time, and he will clear one random debuff from himself. And then all stacks of courage he has will be cleared, and after all of that, he will have a 50% chance to regain 2 stacks of courage. So he loses it, but he loses it to then gain heal over time, and also clear random debuff, and then he has a chance to regain it. That's not the greatest ability ever, but the heal over time might be useful if he's getting low on health, since he can taunt, as we see right here with his second special, where he will deal 100% damage to the target foe, and if the target was spooky or if they had attack up, he will heal for 20% of his max health. He then gains taunt for 2 turns and max health up 2 for 3 turns, and all stacks of courage are cleared from him as well for this ability, and if 5 stacks were cleared, all Ghostbuster heroes will gain Hardy. So you might want to not use that first special and instead save until you have 5 stacks of courage to use the second one right here for that Hardy. At least just get that once, so all of your units have Hardy for the rest of the battle. And then similar with the last ability, at the end of all this, you will have a 50% chance to regain 2 stacks of courage. And then for his passive ability, whenever he is attacked and takes damage, that damage is reduced by 7% for each stack of courage that he has. And then whenever another Ghostbuster ally is called to assist, they have an 80% chance to gain defense up. Then we move on to probably the best Ghostbuster character, Egon. His basic attack will deal 90% damage to the target foe, plus 5% bonus damage for each foe that had stealth. So let's say Lloyd uses his stealth ability, that will be plus 20% damage against Lloyd. And if the target is spooky, the bonus damage is 10% for each foe instead. For his first special ability, he will deal 70% damage to the target foe, plus 10% damage for each Ghostbuster or Techie hero, so potentially 60% additional damage in a full Ghostbuster team, if that counts himself, since he is a Techie. And then he will deal 65% damage to all other foes, and foes who had stealth are then inflicted with defense down 2. For his second special, you will select another target hero, and that hero will gain Prepared, and if they were a Ghostbuster, they also gain critical damage up 2 for 2 turns. And if the target hero was a Spooky or a Techie, they will also gain Debuff Immunity for 2 turns as well. And then finally, after all of that, Egon will gain everything that the target hero gained. His passive ability is whenever he is attacked by a foe that had stealth, he has a 30% chance to reduce the incoming damage by 30%. And then whenever a Ghostbuster character assists, they will heal for 5% of their max health. And if they had defense up, they will heal for 10% instead. And then finally for him, we have his ultimate, which is the best ability of all of these Ghostbusters. He will deal 100% damage to all foes, plus 25% bonus damage for each other Ghostbuster hero, so potentially that could be 200% damage. Then he will reduce the foe's pet by 35%, and then spooky foes, or foes with 50% or more health, are also inflicted with Debilitate, and then all Ghostbuster heroes and heroes inflicted with fear will gain attack up 2 for 3 turns, and then all debuffs will be cleared from all Ghostbuster heroes, and fear will be cleared from all others. And then after all of that, if Slimer is an active hero, he will also inflict fear on all foes for 2 turns. There is a lot going on with that ability, but it is quite powerful. I'm curious to see what the cooldown is going to be for that one. And then finally, we have the Ecto 1 set. Let's start with the first ability. At the start of the battle, each Ghostbuster hero will have a 35% chance to gain critical chance up to for 2 turns, and a 5% bonus chance for each spooky foe. And whenever a magical hero assists, they will have a 30% chance to remove stealth from a random foe. Okay, not a huge chance, but at least it is there. For the second ability, whenever a spooky hero critically hits, they have a 20% chance to clear 1 random debuff from the target foe for each Ghostbuster hero and copy the buff to themselves. So potentially that percent chance could get a lot higher if you're using more Ghostbusters in your team. Or maybe that's talking about the number of buffs cleared. Not quite sure there, but this will get much better if you're using a full Ghostbuster team. And then whenever a Ghostbuster hero critically hits, they will have an 80% chance to inflict skill down for 3 turns on the target foe. For the third ability, this one says, basically, whenever a Ghostbuster hero uses a non-attack ability, each other hero with 1 or more stacks of courage has a 60% chance to assist for 35% damage. And whenever a role model hero deals damage, they have a 35% chance to inflict fear for 1 turn, plus 5% bonus chance for each stack of courage. And then finally, the fourth ability and the final ability, whenever a Ghostbuster hero uses a special ability, there is a 40% chance to inflict 1 stack of damage over time for 2 turns on a random foe with stealth for each Ghostbuster hero. I'm not sure exactly what is being affected with the section that says for each Ghostbuster hero. I'm not sure if that is increasing the chance to inflict or the number of stacks applied, but potentially that's going to be just a lot of stacks of damage over time, and that could work really well versus Ninjago units, especially Lloyd and Wu. And I mean, if there's just Wu in a team, you could potentially get him out pretty early if you can get enough damage over time stacks on him there. And then also, whenever a techie hero uses a special ability, each non-spooky hero will have a 40% chance to gain a stack of courage. Alright, well, those are all the kits right there. Now let's kind of talk about how these all work together, and there are a lot of ways that these work. But let's start by talking about the assisting, because that's a big part of this kit, as we see right here with Egon's passive ability. Whenever a Ghostbuster character assists, they heal for 5% of their max health. And Winston's passive is whenever another Ghostbuster hero is called to assist, they have an 80% chance to gain defense up. So that's going to work really well with Egon's passive ability, and it will be a 10% heal if they did have that defense up. And then with the Ecto 1's first ability, that one says, as we just read a second ago, whenever a magical hero assists, they will have a 30% chance to remove stealth from a random foe, and that right there will apply to Venkman. Speaking of Venkman, his first special is the most obvious way to call assists with the Ghostbusters. He will deal 90% damage and then call a random Ghostbuster ally to assist for 80% damage. And if there aren't any Ghostbuster allies, he will instead call a random ally to assist for 50% damage. So that's the most obvious assist right there, but there's also one way that will be more common, but it's also a little bit more complicated. So it starts with the Ecto 1's third ability, and this one reads, whenever a Ghostbuster hero uses a non-attack ability, and the only two are Egon's second special and Winston's first special, each other hero with 1 or more stacks of courage has a 60% chance to assist for 35% damage. And also, this one does say whenever a role model hero deals damage, they have a 35% chance to inflict fear for 1 turn, plus 5% bonus chance for each stack of courage. So that means that Winston will be inflicting fear as well, and fear also works with most of the Ghostbuster characters. But then, with the Ecto 1's fourth ability right here, whenever a techie hero uses a special ability, each non-spooky hero has a 40% chance to gain a stack of courage. So Egon is a techie, and when he uses a special ability, Winston, Venkman, and himself all will have a 40% chance to gain a stack of courage. And then Venkman and Egon don't have a way to actually lose that courage, so this only has to trigger once for them to be able to be called to assist by the non-attack abilities, which will lead to a lot of assisting, a lot of healing, and a lot of damage. Also, you have to keep in mind that when a unit assists, they will be using their basic attack. So Winston will be gaining more courage, Egon will be doing a lot more damage if there are enemies under stealth, and also additionally when Venkman assists, that will trigger that first ability of the Ecto 1, and there will be a chance to dispel stealth. It all works really well. It's pretty well designed. It's a little bit complicated because it uses multiple abilities with the set and multiple different characters for it to all work together, but it looks like there is going to be a decent amount of assisting with that courage gain right there. Also, the Ghostbuster characters seem to be very anti-debuff, so they actually might do pretty well up against a pirate team in Redbeard because they cleanse a lot of debuffs pretty often. As I mentioned earlier, with Slimer's passive, whenever he gains stealth, which is whenever he's damaged, he will clear 2 debuffs from himself. And then with Ray's special, he will have a 70% chance to clear 2 debuffs from the hero with the most debuffs, and if the target foe had grit down, Ray will clear all stacks of fear from all Ghostbuster heroes, and clear 1 random debuff from all spooky heroes. And that right there ties in with Slimer's first special ability, where he will be inflicting grit down to foes that had fear, which, like I said earlier, comes from a bunch of different characters in this team, including his own basic, so that's another way that this is all tied together quite well. And also, of course, Ray's passive ability, whenever he is critically hit, he will clear 1 random debuff from a random hero, and also Egon's ultimate is just a full team debuff cleanse. So a lot of interesting anti-debuff synergy right there. And they also have some pretty good pep reduction mechanics. Venkman's special will deal 120% damage and then reduce their pep by 50%. And if the target was spooky or their pep was reduced to 0, it will stun them for 1 turn, as we talked about earlier, so that is going to be quite effective. And as we also talked about earlier, Slimer's special will make foes without fear lose 30% pep and inflict them with speed down. Very useful right there. And Egon's ultimate will also reduce all foes' pep by 35%, and spooky foes or foes with 50% or more health are also inflicted with debilitate. And when you damage an enemy with debilitate, they will lose 100% of their pep. So all around, the kits are pretty complex, but they do seem to work together quite well, and I think to really get maximum use out of this team, you will need the full team of 5. Some of these characters might be good as plug-and-play characters, like Slimer might work well in a spooky team. Some of these others might work well in like a techie or a magical team, but that is still way down the road when we get more of those characters for those faction tags. But there is potential there. But if you really want to get use out of these characters, I think you are going to need the full team of 5. Because as I talked about earlier, there's a lot of ways that these all tie together. All of these abilities kind of need all the others to really work. But it looks like it's going to be quite effective. And yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to it. I'm personally not going to be spending for these characters, but hopefully I'll be able to get you some footage of these characters maxed from other players that do decide to spend. So thanks as always for watching, and I will see you in the next one.